Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for today's Fiber Broadband Association webinar. My name is David Norris. I'm the webinar producer here at FBA. We appreciate you taking time out of your day to join us. Today's webinar, DDoS, Threatscape, and Mitigation Strategies, and this is being brought to us by NTT Data. And just so you know, NTT Data has another webinar we did recently in the beginning of September, I believe. And so if you go out to our website, you can see their other webinar there, and we'll include a link to that too in the follow-up. So as I mentioned, today is being brought to us by NTT Data. And before we jump in and introduce our speaker today, I just want to go over a couple quick housekeeping items. First of all, as attendees, you are in listen-only mode, but we do want to hear from you. We'd like to keep this interactive, so please take advantage of the Ask a Question tool, which is located in the lower left-hand side of your screen. And we will try and address all those questions when we get to the Q&A portion or throughout the presentation here today. We also have a number of resources available. Those are located in the resources tool, which is in the upper right-hand side of your screen. Feel free to grab those and check those out. There's an opportunity there to connect with the team here as well. And if you want to connect with them, you can use the tool there. There'll also be a question in our survey following today's webinar. We have a very brief survey. If you could take a moment to take that survey, that would be great. And in that survey, one of the questions will be whether or not you want to continue the conversation. So if you're interested in doing that, continuing the conversation with NTT, please do so. Finally, this will be available on demand through the FBA website. We'll have that up within 24 to 48 hours, and you can find that in the events tab. And that link will also be in the follow-up email. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and we'll get started here. So I'm pleased to be joined today by Darren Grabowski. He is the manager of the network security team at NTT Data. And as I mentioned, he's going to be talking about security and DDoS attacks today and mitigation strategies. Darren has over 25 years of experience in technology, and more than 15 of those years were focused on security. Darren, he has a strong background and track record for helping NTT Data and its global IP network customers protect their networks and online presence from cyber threats. This includes, of course, DDoS attacks. During his career, Darren has held several technical positions handling security and spam-related issues, managing daily operations, and helping develop new policies and procedures. He's a frequent speaker at global industry events around the world, and he is based in the Dallas area in the United States. So Darren, welcome. We appreciate you taking time to share your insights and expertise with us today. And with that, I will hand things over to you to get things started. So take it away, Darren.
Thank you, David, and just want to welcome everybody to today's webinar. Thanks for taking your time out of your day. I know we're all very busy. I'm very busy, but I get to come and talk to you about my favorite topic, which is DDoS. So let's just go ahead and kick it off and just kind of want to walk through the agenda really quick. We're just going to talk about the Threatscape, some mitigation strategies, NTT's solutions, and then we got some time for some Q&A. So hopefully you guys have come with some great questions. So before we start, I just want to start with a quick poll, and that is, has your organization been the target of a DDoS attack? Either your organization, maybe even you personally, if you're a gamer. So it's kind of curious to see what you guys had to say on this. And don't be shy, this is anonymous, so nobody's going to know if your organization was under attack or if you're under attack. I don't think I've ever personally been attacked, but my organization definitely has been attacked. All right, so wow, that's good. 71% of you have not been attacked, so congratulations. But I also wonder, have you been attacked and you just didn't even realize it? Because that is one thing that we see, is that there are attacks happening all the time on the internet, and sometimes they're detected and sometimes they're not, because they're what we would call, from the backbone perspective, just noise. And so for those of you, the 20% that has been attacked, hopefully it was mitigated and didn't cause too many disruptions. So let's go ahead and just talk about the DDoS Threatscape and what does the industry see, what do we see, and kind of what's the state of DDoS right now. These are some headlines that I pulled from the news just recently. These kind of run the whole spectrum of how what the state of the Threatscape is, or the DDoS Threatscape. There's a lot of DDoS for hire companies that are out there that are coming up. There's just manufacturing issues. There's tech overtaking gaming, which is kind of surprising because gaming has typically been the highest target, but then there's a lot of companies that are in the tech side of things that are getting attacked. The attacks are evolving, they're growing. There's new botnets that come out each and every day. Earlier this year, we actually saw the 1111 bot be responsible for over a terabit of traffic to one of our customers. And that was the first time we'd seen a terabit attack in probably a year directed toward one of our customers. But I think the most interesting is this, probably the smallest of the headlines down there, is that Cloudflare mitigated a record-breaking 22 terabit attack. And all three of these attacks, it's interesting, came this year. So it was 7.3, 11.5, and then 22 terabits, all within the span of a few months. And this is concerning from the backbone perspective because a 22 terabit attack is pretty much going to shut down all the peering points of the internet, as well as just a lot of networks in general. But we didn't see much impact from this one, but we'll talk about that attack just a little bit later. So the first trend I wanted to talk about is looking at what we call volumetric versus direct path attacks. If you're not familiar with these terms, volumetric is just the raw attacks. It's your amplification attacks. So your DNS, SSDP, NTP, charge-in, all of those kinds of attacks that are designed to overwhelm the connection of a provider or of your services and not necessarily attack the service itself. Where a direct path attack are your TCP-based attacks, SYN floods, ACK attacks, things like that that are designed to attack the host itself to overwhelm those resources. But in reality, these attacks are so large on both sides that a direct path can be volumetric, but it also will do things like overwhelm firewalls. And those firewalls might fall over well before a router or before your actual connection, before your bandwidth is consumed. And we kind of measure these in two different ways. Volumetric, we tend to look at bits per second, where a direct path, we look at packets per second, because you subscribe typically, based on bandwidth, 1 gig, 10 gig, 100 gig, 400 gig. But those connections also have a certain amount of packets that can go through. So you may see an attack that is a direct path attack that could be, 50 million packets per second, but the bandwidth is actually very low. And you say, hey, why was my link congested when, the bandwidth wasn't very high? Well, that's because it was those packets that were actually congesting the network. And so this is from one of our partners, NetScout, Arbor. You guys might be familiar with them. And this is sort of what they've seen since 2024 up through May of this year. And as you can see, those direct path attacks have taken over volumetric in their data. They take data from about 2/3 of the tier 1 providers. A lot of the tier 2s and other companies contribute to what they call Atlas. And so they, through this Atlas data, they can go in and they have a great view of the internet. And so they get a really good idea of what the internet as a whole is seeing. But our data is a little bit different when it comes to this. We are actually still seeing more direct path attacks. And so, as you can see, they really climbed in June. They sort of leveled off. We did cross that, or come close to crossing that in February. And last year, we did cross that line a couple times. So we're not quite with the rest of the industry, but we're getting there. And I think, as botnets continue to grow, as the attacks continue to evolve, I think we're going to see more of these direct path attacks versus the amplification. And part of that is also because the providers, a lot of content providers and a lot of the network providers are working on tracing back the spoof traffic that causes these amplification attacks to their sources so we can get them shut down. Because there's a lot of bad actors out there. Probably the most famous one is Stark Industries that exist as a hosting provider. And as long as the check clears, as long as a credit card can be charged, they really don't care what you do with their services. And so they're responsible for quite a few of the attacks that are generated on the internet. And they host quite a few of the websites where you can go and purchase these attacks. And so we're, as an industry, trying to work to shut these companies down so we can try and get away from these volumetric attacks because they really are probably the most disruptive attacks on the internet and really cause most of the congestion and issues that we see. So when we look at the attack vectors that are being used, again, this is Arbor's data. The TCP ACK number is the top that they've seen in their Atlas data. And this one was concerning for me, especially because earlier this year we had an attack that we were trying to mitigate. and our typical countermeasures for SYN were not working. And so we went back and looked at it after the fact, and these were coming from the attack was coming from a botnet, and it was making the three-way handshake, which is what the way the TCP mitigation works is you insert yourself into that three-way TCP handshake. You send back a challenge and you wait for that challenge to come back. And if it does, you authenticate that as a good host and you send it through. Well, the attackers were authenticating that three-way handshake, and so it looked like legitimate traffic. And so we had to shift our strategies and find different ways to mitigate that attack. And so it didn't surprise me when I was at Arbor's event last week to see that this number was so high, because it is an effective attack strategy that these miscreants have figured out. And so, it's just another time for us to pivot as the defenders against DDoS and find different ways to mitigate those attacks. But then you see the second one is DNS amplification. That's probably the king of amplification attacks. It's going to continue to be that way. The unfortunate part about DNS is that we do, as an industry, have to maintain open DNS resolvers so people can make use of them. Google runs an open resolver, Cloudflare does, NTT does, and we do see those servers in these attacks. And so while we're trying to defend and we're urging customers to turn off open resolvers if they can, we are in the position where we can't, and so we actually participate in attacks. So it's not fun knowing that, but it is, as we say, it is what it is, and it's just the state of where we are. And you can see TCP SYN, ICMP still very high. I've been around long enough where you guys might remember ping of death. You could DDoS a network by hitting the broadcast IP with a ping, and then finally Cisco fixed that. And you get your SYN amplification, you reset, and going down from there. For us, the attack vectors were a little bit different. We saw a lot of SSDP amplification. I don't know why. It was just the top target attack vector that we saw. But one thing about these attacks is that most of the attacks that we see are multi-vector, which means each attack is going to use a lot of these amplification attacks as part of the attack. And so I think that's probably why our SSDP numbers are so high, is because the attacks that we see, virtually every one of them is using SSDP. Now, it may not be the highest amount of bandwidth being used in that attack, but it is certainly one of the highest number attack vectors that we do see. And then it's followed by DNS, NTP, SYN floods, and the other amplification. And you see our TCP is very low, but I think that we're going to start seeing that increase as we move along, just to kind of go along with what the industry is saying. When we look at mitigations from our network, these are the mitigations that the actual attacks that we mitigated. And so you can see, from a mitigation standpoint, we didn't hit those terabit ones. We did observe them, but we never actually mitigated any of those. About 600 gigs was the largest that we did mitigate. But if you look down towards July on the far right of that graph, you see that almost 400 gigs. That was that TCP attack that I talked about earlier. And so you can see that while it's a direct path attack, it's still very high in volumetric traffic as well. And that was that attack where we saw that and said, oh, we have to shift our strategies. And as you can see, the subsequent attacks from there, we were actually able to successfully mitigate those. And the other highlight from this I want to point out is the bottom graph is our auto versus our manual mitigations. So the dark blue is the manual mitigations that we perform for our customers, and the rest of that are auto mitigations for the first half of 2025. As you can see, automation is key. These attacks, they're frequent and they don't last long. And so if you're not auto mitigating and you're relying on humans, you're probably going to end up doing more of a post-mortem than actually mitigating the attack. And here's why we see that. If you look at this graph, it's going to show you that the majority of these attacks are less than 15 minutes. And so I don't know about you, but I can't respond in 15 minutes from the time that we get an alert for an outage to the time that we determine that it's a DDoS attack and mitigate it in a manual way. So we have to rely on automation, machine learning, AI, those kinds of things are getting very popular. Last week at the Arbor event, it was AI everywhere. You could throw a rock and hit somebody talking about AI. So AI is definitely going to be important as we move into, our next phase of the internet as we grow. I didn't want to talk about AI, but the reality is that we do need to talk about AI and how we're going to use this. But I think the most important thing here is to lean into that automation and allow, the auto mitigations to make the determinations on if we're going to go ahead and mitigate these attacks, or if we're going to, or not mitigate them. But yeah, so the next thing I want to talk about really is just that Cloudflare attack. And this is going to kind of tie into the duration that we talked about, and as well as the automation. So 22.2 terabits per second DDoS attack. They mitigated it. They detected and mitigated this attack, but it only lasted 40 seconds. Typically, in a lot of stats, when we pull routers and things, we only pull every 5 minutes. And so in our NetFlow sampling, we only do, and then the NTT network and a lot of our peers do it at 1 in 10,000 packets. Some do 1 in 5,000. And so that just simply means that out of every 10,000 packets that crosses the routers, we're going to generate a net flow of just 1 packet. But we can use this to detect attacks. We successfully have detected and mitigated attacks using this. We've been doing it for a long time. So, but to find a 40-second attack would be very difficult to catch. And so this was, Cloudflare was mitigating this in line. So it's constantly under protection. So that's why they were able to capture this. But I think most networks may not even see this. There might be a brief amount of drops and congestion within the network, but we're really not going to see, that level of traffic come up in an alert or in our traffic graphs either. So that's something to be said about having inline services, either through a provider or just on your own. And so I want to just jump into kind of the next phase here. But first, we got another poll question we want to ask you guys. And so go to this next one. Do you have a plan in place in case your organization is targeted by a DDoS attack? A lot of companies will put in, playbooks for their NOCs or their SOCs. Do they have different strategies? Have you talked about this internally? Is this something that is on your radar? Have you staffed for it? Have you budgeted for it? Those kinds of things. But just really, do you have a plan in place? And again, this is anonymous, so don't be afraid to answer. All right. So yes, excellent. Over half of you have a plan. Great job. For those of you who don't, I just would ask the question, why not? I know that sometimes it's budgeting, it's staffing. There's a lot of other projects that are high priorities, but I would really question why not. I think, when we leave our house, we make sure the doors are closed, the windows are closed, we lock those doors and windows, maybe set an alarm. We're in the age of the internet now and IoT devices, so maybe we make sure the cameras are active. So we have a plan to secure our homes, but do we have a plan to secure our networks and our servers and our services? And this would even go for cloud-based services as well. Do you take advantage of any of their protection strategies? And this isn't to shame anybody. There's plenty of holes in a lot even some of our processes. We might have some holes there simply because of priorities. But what would it take to maybe convince, management, to convince your peers that we need to talk about this and get a plan in place? So just something to think about. And that's leading us to our next section is the mitigation strategies. And so we have different strategies that we have out on the internet that and that we also provide that can be used to mitigate attacks. So the very first one, this one has been around for a long time, the remote trigger black hole. It was developed by UUNet way back in the day. It allows you to make a BGP announcement to black hole or null route a single IP address. It's very effective. It's very quick. It's how long does BGP propagate, right? That's as long as it takes. But there's some good things and the bad things of the black holing. The capability, it blocks all the traffic to your destination, but that's good and bad traffic. It does require advanced setup time with your upstream providers. You must be doing BGP with them. So you have to have your own ASN and be configured with BGP with your provider. It can be multi-homed. You can do this to all your providers that support it, and I think virtually everybody does. And maybe you can even announce, up to a /24, probably like a /25, so it doesn't get announced to the peers to block all that traffic. And it can be rapidly deployed in one setup. Like I said, it takes as long as BGP propagation. Another capability that we have within our own network is, and others I think are starting to implement this, is just a selective black hole. And that black hole, it does the same thing, except you can block it inside or outside of a region or a country during an attack. So if you, let's say your business here in the United States, and you only do business in the US and you don't do business anywhere outside of that, you could effectively black hole traffic outside of the US and only allow US companies to visit your site or visit, that IP address. And you can it's especially important during like an attack. So, if an attack is coming from, let's say, the Asia Pacific region, you might want to black hole traffic from there and only allow the rest of the world to come in. So it's an effective strategy, but again, it's not intelligent. It's either yes or no. Does traffic come in or does it? And it's all or nothing, right? The second one strategy is to use an ACL, or an access control list, on the Cisco, filter for Juniper, Nokia's. So this is a little bit more surgical. It has the ability to block some traffic to or from a specific destination or source IP address. It does require, and it gets granular. You can do protocol ports. You can do packet sizes if you need to. It requires setup in advance with your provider. And maybe you need to regularly update it as well. It's something you'd have to review on an ongoing basis. But it is limited. Like I said, it's ports, protocols. It may still affect some good traffic. If you block all NTP and you need to sync with a server outside of your network, you have to make sure that you allow that traffic through. So it takes a little more time to set it up, a little more thought setting up, and really understanding what kind of traffic that you have coming in and out of your network. But it is great for reducing the attacks, those amplification attacks, those protocols that don't exist, though, that should not exist on the internet as a whole. It's great in that you can block those and never worry about that traffic coming in your network. And then you can just rely on other services to mitigate those kind of the more advanced attacks. Which leads us to our next mitigation strategy, which is intelligent mitigation. This would be, your NTT DDoS protection service, your Cloudflares, your, whoever else is out there. Lumen has one. I think pretty much every tier one provider provides this service. There's a lot of cloud-based providers out there. Akamai has one. But this is where the intelligence comes in. This is for those attacks that need deep packet inspection, need payload inspections. You can scrub a DNS reflection attack and still use regular DNS with these. Because what it does is you can examine those packets. Now, you can't examine encrypted traffic. That's the one downside of this, unless you have a specific device and then you're willing to share your private keys for that with your provider. I would never do that for my own websites that I have, my personal websites. So I don't think that I would ever do that for my business, but it is a capability if you're willing to share those. It's very quick in operation. Typically, it takes about 30 seconds in our testing to detect and mitigate an attack. You can do manual mitigations. You can mitigate many IPs at one time. There's typically a suite of countermeasures that you can use to intelligently go in there and scrub that traffic. And really, when you kind of combine that with an ACL, you can have an effective mitigation strategy to deal with these attacks. So the toolkit is really all these things at once. And so you can combine these. I talked about having the selective black hole for those services, where you just don't need to sell to somebody outside of the US or offer banking services or whatever it is outside the US. The ACLs to keep that traffic that you just don't care about from entering in your network. So you use those to keep that traffic at bay and use your bandwidth, the rest of your bandwidth, for the services you actually do care about. And then, of course, have an intelligent mitigation solution on top of all that. So when you do get hit with those SYN floods, or you do get hit with that DNS reflection attack, or you do get hit with just a random, a payload that's within some UDP packets or something, you can effectively mitigate those attacks. So all these things can work together. It's not a just pick one and use it. It's really layer your defenses. And this is kind of a network strategy that a lot of people use. ACLs on your routers, it might be on your side because you're preventing stuff coming in. Then you have a firewall in front of that for deep packet inspection. And then on that server itself, you probably have the firewall running on that server to add another layer of protection. So it's the same thing when it comes to DDoS mitigation strategies, is to have a layered approach. And then probably outside of technology is your team. I have a great team of guys that work for me. They, every day they're involved in in dealing with DDoS. But if you aren't always dealing with DDoS like we are, you probably, you get hit with an attack. Maybe it's once a year, a couple times a year. Maybe it's just once every few years. And so you really need to have like checklists and playbooks in place. Make sure they're accessible. So when you're under attack, everybody knows where to get it. It should contain phone numbers, URLs you need, email addresses documented in it. If you self-host, consider having one off network. Keep copies, don't keep the copy in the cloud, keep it on a device that's within your network. If you if it's a device that's outside of your network, maybe in a data center, maybe it's in another office or something, make sure you have out-of-band management to do that. I'm hearing that Starlink is a great out-of-band solution for as a backup. In fact, I have a friend of mine who's has a distribution center, and he has some different sites around him, and they went through a fiber cut. And since it was a fiber cut, they knew they're going to be down for a little while. And so he sent one of his employees actually to Best Buy, bought a Starlink kit, brought it back, was set up in like 15 minutes, and then completely blew through the amount of data they subscribed to as they were able to get, but they had their business back online. And that was the important part, is that they're back online. And so he was considering deploying this as an out-of-band management solution for his multi-sites. So if those go down, he doesn't have to drive there. And in one case, his site is in West Texas. And so he's based here in the Dallas area. That's a pretty long drive. So having that out-of-band management is key. And then, of course, for key team members, I work at home full-time. My team works at home full-time. Have some sort of secondary internet connection. For us, we use our cell phones. We have MiFi devices as well on a separate wireless network. And then, of course, our home internet. So if AT&T goes down, we have a Verizon backup. If my home internet goes down, I can either grab my phone and tether, or I can grab my MiFi and tether. And the same thing goes where if we're out on the road and something happens, we can, easily grab one of those devices, grab our laptop, and mitigate an attack. I've actually mitigated an attack while my wife, I want to be very clear, I was not driving, but my wife was driving to Houston, and I was in the passenger seat mitigating an attack because I had that MiFi, my laptop with me, and was able to successfully deal with that attack. So, having those backup strategies is key, but really your team is, I can't stress enough, just having a good team of people to do that. The other part of this, though, is that you can have all these things in place and you can have those playbooks, but if you don't train and test your team regularly, you may not be respond to that incident as well as you want to, or as well as you could have. If you look at just many different industries, police and firemen, they constantly train. Pilots, they train all the time. They're in the simulator, they're looking at classes, they're always refining what they're doing. Teachers, they have to take classes over the summer and maintain, either credentials or just learn, what the latest trends are and things like that. So every industry is constantly training. I mean, even as, security guys, we still go to industry events. We're still going and taking classes, or we're participating in kind of war games at some of these events. And so that's what, your teams need to do as well, is constantly train, constantly test each other, play war games with your provider. I love doing this with my customers. They'll call us up. They'll have an event that they want to test and run through their playbooks. Some do it quarterly, some do it annually. It doesn't matter. Just, we're willing to do this. And sometimes they'll generate a fake attack, and they'll communicate with us kind of through some back channels to tell us to tell their team what we're seeing. And so we'll say, oh, hey, it's DNS amplification attack towards this IP. and then they'll respond back, okay, well, can you mitigate it? And we'll say, yeah, we mitigated it. And then on the other end, the guy that's internally on their team has stopped the attack, but they put them through real scenarios. And so when I say war game, like, do that, actually do that with your provider, reach out to them. If they don't do it, ask them why not. It's, it doesn't take very long. And honestly, it's part of what we do. So I look at training with our customers and doing these war games as serious as I would dealing with real attacks. So if they want to do that, we want to test ourselves and also kind of prove ourselves too. So definitely war game with your customers. And so that leads into NTT data and who we are and what our solutions are. So if you're not familiar with NTT data is part of the NTT group. We're a Japanese-based company. We're one of the world's largest telecommunication companies in the world, on the Fortune Global 500 list of 2025. That's what they tell me. Anyway, we're a global provider. We offer end-to-end solutions that span the globe. We are not just an ISP. We have managed services, various tech services through NTT data that we offer. 30 billion annual revenue, 50 plus countries. We're one of the top rated employers. I've been here actually 29 years through acquisitions. It's a great company to work for. So that's just who we are. Big provider, but also we're small enough that I will actually get on the phone and talk to you. And then same thing with our NOC. Our NOC is tremendous. If you call into our NOC with a problem, the person who answers the phone is going to be the one to fix your problem. And there's none of those different tiers within the NOC. If they need to escalate, they will. But you're going to get the guy who's going to walk you through that entire, the entire outage or whatever it is. That's what our NOC's going to do. And so while we're this huge company, we feel small because we maintain this a small agile team, and we don't want a lot of layers to put our customers through, because we really want to give you the best network that we can, as well as give you the best support that we can. This is what our backbone actually looks like. So again, we're global. We're on 5 continents, 40 plus countries. We have 90 POPs around the world, and it's 100% available backbone. So if you're any of these places, we can get you connected into. And then from our mitigation strategy as well, we also kind of place our mitigation devices globally, and I'll go into that here in just a second. So from the DDoS mitigation perspective, here's kind of what we offer as really just part of the service if you buy bandwidth from us. The real-time black hole service, that does include that selective black hole. It's both free with IP transit. It just requires you to set a BGP. For the selective black hole, there are communities that you have to tag those different black hole announcements with, but those are all on our website, and you can go on our website anytime and see all of our communities. I think we have the most comprehensive list of BGP communities out of any provider that is out there. And then we have ACLs for WAN point-to-point links. We call it Secure Link, or I think it's kind of the internal name, but what it basically does is it protects your BGP peering sessions. So it uses IP addresses that are not announced outside of NTT, so nobody from externally can attack you because they never see them. And so again, that's also free with your IP transit. And that's one of those layers of security that I talked about earlier. The real, I think the best solution comes with our DDoS protection service. Our DDoS protection service gets you access to my team. We're a 24/7 dedicated security team. We have over 75 plus years of experience. Most of us have been with the company forever. And this goes back pre-acquisition days. We have a globally distributed mitigation platform. We have scrubbers in 13 locations. We have 3 in Asia, 1 in Australia, 3 in Europe, 5 in North America, and then 1 in Sao Paulo. I think that adds up to 13. Do some quick math. We do use Arbor. That's got Arbor's products, Sightline for DDoS detection. We use their HC1000s for scrubbing. And this is HC1000 in every location. It's not a different device. So we can maintain the same level of service throughout the region. When we mitigate attacks, we announce those. We announce the attacked IP to every one of our scrubbing centers. So we don't backhaul the traffic to just one location and scrub it. we want to have it go to every one of our locations, so that way we can scrub it, apply that intelligence scrubbing to it, and then get that traffic back to you to the closest point where it comes in. So if you're multi-homed with us and you have an attack that comes in from all over, it's the clean traffic that we send to you is going to go back to that POP where you intended it. So if it's in Europe, it's going to go in Europe. If it's in Asia, it's going to go in Asia. In the US, it's going to go, to the closest scrubbing center in the US, and then get back to that closest center, or that closest POP to where you're at. This also includes that ACL we talked about. You can have an ACL with us. And then you get direct access to my team via our DDoS portal, which provides all of your alert data. So any alerts that you have will be in the portal. All your mitigations will be in the portal. You can see your configurations within the Arbor system for your thresholds that you've set with us. And then you can also use it to contact my team directly, either in a standard change or an emergency change. So any emergency request pages my team directly. So it pages either the on-duty engineer or the on-call engineer. And then that person will respond back within 15 minutes per our SLA. And so typically it takes us about 2 minutes to respond. So again, we're very quick, very agile. If you're on call on my team, you live with your laptop, your phone, and your Wi-Fi, and it goes everywhere you go. We don't tie somebody to home, but we ensure that they're going to be somewhere where they can be reached, and then they can mitigate those attacks as quick as possible for you. And so that's the NTT protection strategy. And so now I think we got a little bit of time for some questions.
Absolutely. We will open it up to questions. We do have quite a few that have come in here, but first, thank you, Darren, for taking us through everything. This is great insight and information. We appreciate it. You mentioned AI already from a couple of perspectives, so we have a few questions related to this. Somebody has asked, what DDoS trends are you seeing across networks with the increase of AI tools? And, I believe that they might be asking if the AI tools are helping to facilitate the attackers. We have another question. Are attackers leveraging AI and automation to scale or mask their DDoS attacks?
Yeah. From the attacker standpoint, I think they're definitely using AI. It's actually quite interesting because AI will not let you generate a script to attack somebody. So if you went to ChatGPT, I call him Chad. So if you went to my friend Chad, you said, hey, Chad, can you write a script to attack this person? It'll say, I can't do that. However, if you went and said, hey, I have this script written in Perl, that will attack somebody, can you convert it to Python? It will. So I think there's still some things on the AI side that they need to look at, have a little more intelligence into that to say, oh, wait, no, this looks like you're going to use this to attack somebody. I'm not going to convert it for you, figure it out on your own. But the attackers are definitely using AI to probably, for their analytics. I think a lot of us are doing that these days. They could be using it to manipulate their tools by asking creative questions and getting creative on how they do that. To mask the attacks, I don't know if any, I haven't seen any news or any reports yet that say that, they found evidence that attackers use AI to mask them. The attackers are getting a little smarter with their strategies where they want those attacks to look like they're legitimate traffic. That way they can bypass that intelligent mitigation. Goes back to that TCP Act that I talked about earlier, where they're using real devices, so they insert themselves in the TCP stream. So I think that there is some level of AI that they might be leveraging for that. But again, I haven't seen any evidence of it. On the mitigation side of it, there's definitely machine learning involved in AI, especially in the inline space, where they can constantly evaluate the traffic. It's harder from the network side and how we have our service set up, because the only thing we do is we look at net flow records. We don't actually look at packets. We don't look at the payload of those packets. That's just not part of net flow. And so it's a little harder to see how the attacks might be changing. But when you have an inline device, or when you're scrubbing it, if you happen to be attacked and you're running the traffic through the scrubbers, that's when the machine learning and AI can really kick in, because it's going to evaluate that traffic in real time. The only downside of not having it go through all the time is you don't have a baseline of what normal traffic should look like. So that's where, for part of your mitigation strategy, having an inline device that can scrub that attack traffic before it reaches your firewalls and before they fall over. But maybe, it's not enough bandwidth for you to signal up to your provider. So it's probably one thing I need to add into that list is put in some sort of inline device on your own side to clean that traffic. They are with the Arbor, like I said last week, Arbor was talking about AI quite a bit. A lot of it's heavy on those inline devices, but they're also starting to bring it into the TMS side of the house for to use during the actual mitigations when you redirect the traffic through the scrubbers. So hopefully that answered your question.
Yes, it did. It's interesting to just think about how they're leveraging, how attackers may be leveraging AI and what their limitations are as well. So it's somewhat related. Somebody has asked, how do you distinguish between a normal traffic spike and a legitimate attack?
So flash mobs happen, I know Apple just released their new iOS, and so that caused a spike in traffic as everybody rushed to download it. When new games come out, we see that. From the network perspective, it's hard because we only look at, IPs, ports, protocols. Now we can see who's sending that traffic. Oh, it's all coming from a content provider. And so we, we're geeks, we're nerds. So we typically know something's happening. So like, oh, yeah, it makes sense. Apple just released the new OS, or, this game just, became live, or this game is now getting, pushed out to all the devices. I think there's Battlefield 6 is coming out, and I think it's getting pushed to PlayStations and the Xboxes soon. If you've pre-ordered that game prior to the launch. And so we will see that uptick in traffic. Again, from the network side, it's harder to tell because we're just looking at IPs, ports, protocols. If I see a whole lot of HTTP 443 traffic, I know that that's web traffic, but then I can look at where it's coming from. Now that might cause a mitigation to trigger if it crosses those thresholds, but because it's all legitimate traffic, it'll just flow through and it'll just pass on to the user with some, there might be a slight increase in latency, very low, but it's pretty much unnoticeable for the most part. Now, if you're doing it inline, then you might know, that it's legitimate or not, because you have your baselines, and then also you just have a little bit more insight of what that traffic looks like. So if it's not encrypted, you'll be able to see the payload and see, oh, this looks malicious because it's a whole lot of posts to, a search, and those post requests are a huge search string. And so they're trying to kill this web server by using up all the resources by having it, process all these requests for searches that don't exist or something along those lines.
So somebody chimed in just while you were talking in response to that, asking if they can characterize it. Can we say then that based on the current state of art solutions and technologies, DDoS attacks can be detected once they happen and mitigated, but not avoided proactively?
So from the network side, it's hard to do it proactively because we have to have traffic before to get an alert before we can mitigate an attack. And so there's going to be a lag between that. And then there's BGP propagation that has to occur as well. However, with an inline device, those are constantly scrubbing. So those are constantly looking at that traffic. And when that layered approach that I talked about, if you were to have like an Arbor AED device, and I go back to Arbor because I'm really familiar with theirs, but there's Radware, there's Correro, there are different mitigation platforms that are out there. But if you have an inline device that you own and that's protecting your network, it's constantly looking, it's constantly evaluating, and it's making those changes it needs. But if it gets to a certain bandwidth threshold that you set, you can signal up to your provider. So let's say you're an NTT customer, you have an AED, and then all of a sudden you get attacked and it hits 50% of your bandwidth or 75% of your available bandwidth. And you say, okay, that's our threshold, take over. You could signal to NTT, and then NTT would say, okay, we start a mitigation, and then we bring all that traffic in. So because of flow-based detection, it works great, but it's never going to be really going to be one-to-one, which is what an inline device is. It's one-to-one sampling. It's looking at that traffic in real time.
So this is actually an interesting one. Someone has chimed in. They're asking, what steps are you taking to identify and thwart low and slow application layer attacks? So using HTTP or get post. Gives a couple of examples here. saying these are harder to detect from legit users, and this person at least believes that we'll see more of these as we see more attackers taking advantage of machine learning and AI versus volume attacks.
Right. That's where the mitigation strategies get a little tricky. There are countermeasures to defeat those. So there are various countermeasures we can put in place, TCP connection resets, that will time out users after a certain amount of time. Knowing where these attacks are coming from, if they're using botnets and things like that, is going to be key, because they're going to do those direct path attacks. And because they want to continue to send that traffic, if it's a TCP-based attack and if they spoof the source of a TCP SYN countermeasure is going to defeat that attack. So we're not going to have to worry about it. If it does authenticate it, connection resets because they want to keep that open for so long, that's going to come in and that's going to kill those attacks. So we've already got a good mitigation strategy. Now, it is an interesting question about the detection side of it, because with these traffic levels being so low, how would we detect these attacks? The detection component is hard because you don't want to set your thresholds for like TCP so low that you're going to trigger a bunch of false positives. So this really comes into the partnership that you have with your ISP. So either you can run that inline device that would defeat that and you wouldn't have to worry about it. There's some mitigation strategies you can do on the devices themselves, on those servers themselves to defeat those. But if you need help from your provider, this is where, having a cooperation would come in and be able to say, hey, we're seeing this traffic. Can you guys start a mitigation so we can just, see if that's going to solve it? Because maybe we're not quite sure what it is, or maybe you do know what it is, and then we can start that mitigation. But I typically look at it like your provider, your third-party DDoS mitigation is going to be for those attacks that you can't handle locally. So if you have, let's say you buy 10 gigs of capacity in your locations, and you're only maybe using 2 gigs or something, you got plenty of overhead, but you can also put your own mitigation strategies inside of that and handle that security in-house. It'd be like having, you're going to buy your own firewall. I don't know, maybe you don't. Some people want to have a managed service, and you can use a managed service the same way. But having that device sitting inside your network to do that protection, and then use your provider or your third party for those larger attacks that consume the bandwidth, or maybe you just don't want to deal with it at that time and you just want them to take over, whatever it looks like. But that is a good question to ask, though, and it just goes back to those other mitigation strategies and having a good team of people that's monitoring that stuff for you as well. Hopefully that answered your question.
So we've got another one here. A person is asking, where's the best place to stop a DDoS attack, and who is best suited to stop them? Are there any reasons why these shouldn't be handled by the upstream transport provider?
So the best place to prevent a DDoS and to stop a DDoS is at the edge. This means if you are what we call an eyeball network, if you are selling to consumers, if you are a hosting provider and you're selling, access to virtual private servers or dedicated servers, that's the edge of the network. And that is where the DDoS really should be stopped by putting in the BCP38 measures to not allow spoofing to come out. And so that's going to be, strict URPF, putting in ACLs to block it, whatever that may be. We cannot do that as a provider. If I put strict URPF on my customer links, it's going to break multi-home, their multi-home services that they use, because they may receive traffic to a specific prefix, or they may send traffic from a specific prefix, but if they're sending it, they may not announce it to us. So they may send it through us, but then the return traffic goes through another provider that they have to balance out their bandwidth, however they want to do it, or maybe it comes out from one location, but goes into another location. And so if we were to do that, it would actually break routing if we were to not allow that traffic to come in from our customers. And so from the middle of the network, we can't put in BCP38 practices. It's just not feasible. And that's going to be middle of the network, either if it's a tier 2 provider, but those edges. So if you run an eyeball network and you're selling to end users, I'm a Frontier customer here at home, I would expect that they would have those kind of measures in place so I can't spoof traffic from my home. And that includes from my IoT devices. I live in a master plan community here in the Denton County area, or about 4,400 homes. It's a golf course community. There's a lot of people with a lot of IoT devices. I look at around this community and I think, wow, this is a great botnet. And so, but that's where, it would be Frontier's responsibility to say, hey, we're not going to allow spoofing to come in simply because we can't do it. So yeah, that's the best place to really stop it, is at the edge. And it's a responsibility of any eyeball network or any hosting provider out there to do that. And then the transit providers come in to help alleviate that traffic when those attacks are launched, and for us to take care of it in the middle of the network for our customers. But we can't do it for everybody. It's just too expensive. The price per meg is being driven down by the market. And, obviously the level of service that everybody wants to go up. If you were to say, hey, I want a true clean, network, I want, any traffic going to my IP, I want it to be truly clean. I couldn't even tell you right now how much that would probably cost per megabit, but it would be substantial.
So you mentioned IoT devices, and I want to go back to that just because we've had another question come in specific to IoT devices. It's just a general question, though. I just wanted to know if you want to add to what you were already saying there. They're asking, what measures can organizations take to reduce the risk posed by IoT devices that might be compromised?
Yeah, absolutely. Even from your own network, don't allow spoofing from your own network to leave your network if you can. I don't use Frontier's router. I have my own router, so because I'm a nerd like that, and so I can put in protections. So if for some reason I have an IoT device gets compromised, it could participate in a spoof attack. But the biggest thing is to just make sure that you're using reputable manufacturers. I know that Amazon has been flooded with ripoffs of devices, copycat devices, but they have poor security. And so reputable manufacturers, maintaining the patches on those, we joke about Patch Tuesday for Microsoft, but that's a thing. These IoT devices do get regular updates pushed out. I logged into one of mine the other day and I saw that I had a notification that the devices were updated automatically. But that's the big thing, is just maintaining those patch levels on any sort of device that you have in your home. Obviously we can't do that as an industry for everybody, but we can push on those manufacturers to stop using default passwords, to make it and I think there's even legislation out there that mandates this in some states here in the US, that you have to give the consumer the ability to go in and change even internal passwords on devices. Because you buy a camera for your home, well, that camera itself might actually have a username and password on it for the firmware, and the attackers have figured out how to get in there. So the camera, the device itself is not compromised, but the actual camera component is, because a lot of companies will buy the same camera component from the same manufacturer and then put it into their devices, that they sell under their branded names. And so that's where a lot of these problems come in, is just on that there alone. But then also not changing default passwords, having weak passwords is also another issue. And that's why I think with the with IoT, that's just going to be what we have to do. But how do you convince your grandma that you got her this cool light bulb that'll turn on and off at night, so she doesn't have to struggle and suddenly it's compromised, but she has no idea what to do with it. So it's definitely going to be something I think as an industry we're going to struggle with, and it goes back to those BCP 38 practices and putting those things on the edge of the network.
So we have a few questions just related to NTT data and your services. So somebody's asked, do we have to specify a single point of entry to receive the clean traffic from you?
No, we will take the traffic from any ingress point into our network, so peers, other customers, and then we will send that back to you through an NTT link. You do have to be a NTT subscriber to use our services, but we'll send that back to wherever you announce it from. So if you're multi-homed, wherever you announce those, it could be another anycasted, unicasted prefix, but we'll send it back to the closest point where it ingresses our network, and from that closest point of the scribing center. So it almost looks like natural routing, just a slight detour.
Got it. And is there a limit to the amount of dirty/clean traffic that they can send you?
No, it's pretty much limited by our network. So whatever the network can ingest is what we will ingest and scrub and send back to you. We don't, our service is based on, depending on the level, we have multi-levels of the service. It goes from just the ACL only all the way up to a service for service providers that could use to resell to their customers. And so we have our two automated products, which is our service provider and what we call DPS Max. Those are minute based. So you can subscribe to a certain number of minutes per month. And then if you go over that, there's an additional charge for those overages. So that's done by minute. And then the other tiers are done by 24-hour period of a mitigation. So basically you get, X number of mitigations, in a 24-hour period for those. So it just depends on which level you subscribe to, but it's not bandwidth based. That'd be almost kind of cruel if you get it with a 22 terabit attack and then I'm going to charge you for it. I would maybe hopefully get a cut of that, and I can retire. So.
So one more, just again related to the services. Somebody asked if they need IP transit with you to use your DDoS mitigation service.
Yeah, you do need IP transit. We don't announce the attack to our peers. So if we mitigate, you are responsible for getting that attack traffic to NTT. So if you don't have us as a provider, then that attack, we're not going to see that attack traffic. So we have to be able to see it to mitigate it. And then to send it back to you, we want you to be on our network and we'll send it back to an NTT link. But we don't offer off-net, as we would say, DPS service.
And this one came in a little bit late, so shifting gears again. I doubt you have the percent, but somebody's asking what percent of global ISPs enforce egress filtering to prevent spoof traffic? It seems like many aren't enforcing this based on the attack's origins. Yeah,
again, it's so hard to do even on an egress. We're not going to do any kind of filtering to prevent that. Once it gets into the network, it's in the network. It's like the RFC 1918 space, the 192, 168, 17, whatever, 172, whatever, in the 10 space. You might still see traffic originating with that IP address coming into your network. Return traffic will not route. I can't think of anybody. I know we don't do it. I can't think of any of my peers that I talk with on a regular basis that do it on the egress side, because there is a cost to doing that filtering on the router when it comes to resources. And as you drive bandwidth up and the desire to, have better power consumption, less heat, things like that, because power is obviously an issue within data centers. So there's a balance of what you can essentially forward from a router perspective and still have some kind of, your ultimate goal is the throughput. You want to get the packets moving as fast as you can. And anytime you manipulate that on the router, it can cause performance issues. So we did actually try doing URPF at one point. We didn't do strict, but we did loose, and it would cause performance issues on the routers. So trying to do that at scale just isn't feasible.
Got it. And so we have a couple more questions come in here, but I'm afraid that we're running pretty close on time and need to wrap things up. I thought I would finish with this one, and I don't want to put you on the spot, but I do appreciate the question. Somebody's asked, saying that they have limited technical knowledge. They're insurance and risk coordinator, and they want to know if there are any resources where they can learn more about DDoS attacks and security.
Yeah, I think the best place to start is talk with your ISP. Get in touch, with that NTT. If you have no idea what this stuff looks like, joining this webinar is a great way to learn. But also reach out to your ISP, find out who runs that team. If you can talk with them, if they can even send somebody, set up a call with people who need to have this knowledge, and just really partner with your providers to do that. Partner. You probably have services of some kind of maybe managed services, but somebody that you are acquiring services from will have a team of people that you can talk to. And then at the very, like I said, join these webinars and then Google. That's when I want to know something now. I do that. The AI summary is actually pretty good. Sometimes it's pretty good. It still needs some work, but yeah, I would say reach out to your provider would be a great place to start if you want to learn more.
Absolutely, and that echoes something that you said earlier, which is that a lot of people on the call, they're not dealing with DDoS attacks every day, right?
Mm-hmm.
So getting the help and guidance from those experts certainly makes a lot of sense. And of course, reaching out to NTT Data as well for some support there. But with that, I think we should wrap things up. We're just at the hour now. But Darren, this was great. Thank you so much. And thank you to NTT Data for hosting the webinar today. We appreciate it. As I mentioned, there's a few resources for everybody who's attended. If you want to check those out, those will also be in the follow-up email from this webinar. And of course, I want to thank everybody who's attended today as well. Just a quick announcement. We are wrapping up our regional Fiber Connect sessions here. These are our regional events, our regional workshops. They're great, very intimate types of events where you can have some great working time just with your peers in the industry. The next one will be in Scottsdale, Arizona on October 16th. So we look forward to seeing you there. The theme for that one, the focus is really going to be around tribal broadband. So especially, if you work with tribal in your organization, please do try and participate if you're in that area. And then we'll wrap up the year in Kansas City, Missouri on November 11th. So please participate in that one as well if you are in that area. And with that, just thank you again for taking time to participate today. We really appreciate it. If you want to see what else is coming out, just go out to fiberbroadband.org/events, and you will see not only our in-person events like the Regional Fiber Connects coming up, but also what other webinars we have coming up. And of course, we have Fiber for Breakfast happening every Wednesday with Gary Bolton, our CEO and president here. If you're not participating in those, you should definitely check those out. That's every Wednesday morning at 10 a.m. Eastern Time. And with that, we will wrap things up. But thank you again, Darren, and thank you to everyone for attending. Appreciate it.